Welcome in, everyone, to a Seahawks Aftermath. And tonight we have a different co-host with me. We've got Mookie Alexander from Field Goals joining me tonight. Last night, apologies. Something came up, had to deal with it. Personal matter. All's good on that front. So we're ready to rock and roll here tonight and talk Seahawks and talk about the aftermath following the Titans game. Obviously, some news that came out today regarding the Seahawks, in addition of a old face coming back to the franchise, as well as we'll look ahead to the matchup with the Vikings, and we might even talk a little bit about what's going on in Vegas with our old head coach down there and Pete Carroll. But before we do that, Mookie, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right. This stubborn cough, this stubborn respiratory infection that's been bugging me for the last 2 weeks, some of you might have heard it very audibly the last couple of shows that I've done, has seemingly run its course. It's just about ready to go away in time for Thanksgiving. I am ready to, I know Canada's had their Thanksgiving. Now it's time for ours. Much better Thanksgiving because we stretch it out to 4 days. You've got all this sort of food that I'm looking forward to having on my plate. And it feels good to be looking at the high likelihood of a playoff spot for the Seahawks. But whether it's a division title remains to be seen. I'm not counting on it, but hey, last couple of years, we've had to sweat out week 18. I don't think we have to sweat out week 18 for a playoff spot this year. You might have to sweat out week 18 for a division title spot.
Yeah, and that'll be the fun thing to look forward to as we go into this discussion tonight, Mookie. So before we get into that discussion, just a reminder, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. Helps me, helps the algorithm, gets this show out there for more people. And if you haven't already, check out Field Goals. Go over and check out what Mookie and the rest of the great writers and that do over there as well. So with all that being said and covered, we'll get into it right after this. All right, Mookie. Well, let's get into it tonight. And basically, the best way to say this is Seattle responded. And the thing with that is they got the reset they needed, which I think a lot of us were all kind of anticipating, a 1-9 Titans team. But I will say this, I don't think it was as cushiony of a victory as some people would have liked, considering that team was 1-9. The Titans put up a really good fight versus the Seahawks and, kind of made a game of it late there, where I think a lot of us were kind of like, this is now a 6-point game. Is this going to get any closer? Is Seattle going to have to go to overtime in this or have some late drive to win it? How did you feel through that entirety of the game?
I never felt like the Seahawks were going to lose the game. I mean, when it got down to 6 points, they needed an onside kick. And while they got the onside kick, they did it nowhere near the 10 yards required for that to be legal. I definitely would have preferred that it be more comfortable so that we could see the backups play. The lack of turnovers was the good news for the Seahawks offense. The lack of takeaways on the defensive side of the ball was the bad news because they gave up so many 4th-down conversions. But really, it was just if DK didn't have that punt return touchdown, I think that this game would have been really out of sight, because the way that the Titans could have pulled off this upset would be through turnovers, sloppy play from the Seahawks, and things like a block punt return touchdown or some sort of special team score. So they got their punt return touchdown, and they got a couple of offensive touchdowns later on in the game, but they still averaged under 5 yards per play. They still had under 300 total yards of offense. So the running backs had, I think, 17 combined carries for 27 yards. Cam Ward definitely made some really impressive plays in the face of how many pressures that he was dealing with. And as bad as the Titans are, and don't get me wrong, the Titans are a truly bad football team, they've been bizarrely competitive against some of the better teams in the league. Like they could barely muster any first downs against Denver, and they held them to an 8-point loss on the road. Like they only lost 20-12 on opening day. They lost by 14 to the Rams, but they were up at halftime against the Rams. And that's a team that everybody's christening as your Super Bowl champion to be. And then, of course, they lose at the gun to the Texans a week before. They took the Chargers to a pretty close game. They didn't even score an offensive touchdown again. They got a pick six and a punt return touchdown again from DK. Only lost by 7 to a team that is pushing for the playoffs. So, yes, the Titans are bad, but they've shown, some level of fight. And that's all you can ask for a bad football team. From the Seahawks side, it's just they did what they needed to do. They didn't cover the spread. But the bummer would be the injuries, even if it's not to any starters. The injuries is just the one thing that sucks, because now you're really going to have to look at some other roster decisions coming up in the next few games in terms of your special teams, because all three of those players who got hurt, Okada, Surratt, and Holani, are significant special teams contributors.
Yeah, and that's the thing now. This team's depth is really going to be tested. I kind of hope coming out of that bye, going into that Commanders game, okay, we'll get guys back and we'll be able to sustain some health during this back end push to the season. And so far, it's kind of been the opposite. This team's just constantly, and the thing that we've been lucky about is it hasn't been anything season ending, realistically. It just hasn't. Like, we had the Kenny McIntosh injury early on, but everything's been like, hey, we can manage this, we can manage it, because we've got the depth. Well, now the depth's kind of eroding out, and it's getting to be kind of a worrisome thing. And we hope Ernest Jones can be back this week. It sounds like maybe it was a precautionary thing, keeping him out this week. They figured they could get by. And to be honest, Patrick O'Connell did a great job filling in that linebacking core for him or Tyrese Knight, whoever spot he took. But now obviously our safety depth is going to be tested in a way that I don't think they were necessarily anticipating this at this point in the season. But for me, the thing that I'll say that, I felt the reset from the offense in a way. Like, the defense, we expect to play this good. On offense, though, we saw them get back to some of the things that they should have been doing in the Rams game and just stayed away from. You didn't have Sam throw the ball all over the yard. You ran the ball better. Now, there were still some odd decisions on sequencing of plays for me where I was still kind of sitting there going, okay, what's the plan here overall? But obviously JSN does his thing. Sam Darnold plays turnover-free football, and I know there's some people out there going, well, he still had turnover-worthy type throws. I take one of them away where he got hit trying to throw it, I think, down the field on a bang 7 route to Shaheed, and he tried to get it over the safety, and it almost ended up being picked like a punt because it fluttered. But overall, I thought Sam did a great job in bouncing back. He followed his feet. He got back into rhythm. Some of those things were good. So overall, I never worried that they were going to lose the game. You could see the depth being tested to a point where it was like, okay, this is how the Titans are getting back. And got to give credit to what credit's due. Cam Ward played a really good football game for a rookie quarterback. He made some unbelievable plays, kept plays alive. You can see that they have something potentially to build on there in Tennessee with Cam Ward once they get the right pieces and staff around him.
Well, basically, they've got 2 pieces out of a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. I mean, they need a almost entirely new offensive line. Whatever they were paying Dan Moore this offseason was way too much. Skoronski, I guess, could stick around. And Latham, of course, is a new face, but I didn't think he played very well in that game either. I mean, it's a tough task. You're going up against Seattle's defensive line, but also, the whole season, they're 1-10 for a reason. Ward has been under siege, and they don't really have great receivers. So I don't know what was going on with him not being able to utilize Tyler Lockett, because Lockett's obviously found a little bit of life back in Vegas, but familiarity with Geno and Pete, I guess. But DK looks like a promising player. He could be at the very least an all-pro level return specialist, in addition to what he can do as a receiver. But when I see James Prochet in there and Xavier Restrepo coming up from the practice squad, I love Restrepo in college, but I don't know what NFL future he may have other than being Cam Ward's teammate. That's a very talent-poor offense. So they're going to have to do a lot of rebuilding there. Obviously, they're going to need a new head coach because Mike McCoy is the interim. As far as the Seahawks offense, I thought people kind of took their struggles out of proportion. You get 30 points on 9 real drives. That's elite production. So I take out the kneel down. You start the game. It was a game of few possessions. You start the game with field goal, touchdown, field goal, 2-minute drill field goal, I might add. Touchdown, I think touchdown again, and then punt, turnover on downs, punt, end of game. They didn't close the game well. but they started out so well that they built a big lead. I think that Darnold was not at his sharpest in terms of his accuracy. He definitely misfired on a couple of plays, though Kenneth Walker near pick six. That was ugly because it was just a one read, didn't even see the corner there. And he's lucky it wasn't brought back the other way. I agree. Jeff Simmons did hit Darnold on that throw. I'm not sure it was a great decision to even throw that because I think that there would have been enough help for Shaheed in terms of the safety in the corner peeling back there. But the one to AJ Barner near the end zone, that one, I think Daryl Johnson on the broadcast was like, don't throw across your body. It's a dangerous throw. And I agree. Throwing across your body at the goal line into traffic is dangerous, but it actually wasn't either of those DBs that made the play, or neither of those defenders rather made the play. Jihad Ward got a fingertip to the ball. And without that fingertip, I think that ball does get to Barner and he probably catches it for a touchdown. It's just that I think Darnold has to trust his legs a little bit more than he does because he could have scrambled for some yards there. Whether he scores, I don't know. Maybe not, but I think that was a safer play than trying to put the ball in a potentially risky spot. The running game to me was encouraging because they just didn't get enough plays. They only ran 48 plays on offense. But Kenneth Walker, he's the clear running back one. So anybody who's going like, oh, when they need to do 1A, 1B, put that to rest. Walker's possibly going to have a 1,000-yard season. And that's being a part-time lead back, essentially. I think that he's running better. His vision's been really, really good. And when they've been committing to more inside stuff, you notice they didn't run many toss plays. They were running very little outside stuff. And I think it worked to Walker's benefit. And even Charbonnet, I think, had a good game in his limited touches. But I think that should be the hierarchy. Walker getting more looks as a lead back. And as Tyler Olson astutely pointed out on field goals, now we're seeing him get more looks as a receiving back, like just as a check down option. And you retweeted it, but I really like that screen to Walker where you have Utz as a lead blocker, essentially. So you counter the blitz by finding Walker, and you got two guys running deeper routes down the field, clear them out, clear that space out underneath so that Walker essentially has the freedom to roam underneath and go get yards after catch, and Robbie Utz can lay a block on somebody. Now, Utz didn't really lay a block on anybody significant in that play, but the concept of that play, I think, is good because we know how often the actual screens with the offensive linemen trying to block have been an issue for Seattle for forever now. So, yeah, the offense, I think, for the most part, did a pretty good job against, again, a bad team, but they needed that after the struggles of the previous week. I am also not worried about the red zone offense. I know people were freaking out. Oh, they were kicking field goals on red zone. Well, the Rams game, the Rams are top defense in the league by scoring and DVOA. The Titans game, one of those field goals was like end of half, 2-minute drill situation. They didn't have enough shots at the end zone. They did get two red zone touchdowns anyway. One to JSN and one to Zach Charbonnet. So that'll still, you're not going to be incredibly elite every week. They're still 11th in red zone touchdown percentage. So I'm not worried there. Not even worried about the defense a whole lot because by the end of the game, they're playing DeAnthony Bell. Patrick O'Connell is having to start the game and play 40 some odd snaps. Obviously, Jaron Breed's out. They're still missing guys like Reed and Love, So it would have been nice to see them dominate a little bit more. But it wasn't like Tennessee was marching up and down the field with great success. They didn't hit that many explosives. So, yeah, they should have won by more. But would you rather they lose? I mean, they won the game.
Agreed. And so let's kind of talk about this. Darnold and JSN obviously find their rhythm again. Not that they had really lost it, but JSN breaks the Seahawks single season receiving record in 11 games this year, which I think it took DK up until the last game of his season or second to last game to break that record when he took it over from Steve. And to your point, Darnold did play a better game, but again, I'm full agreement with you, Mookie. He's got to use his legs more. And the one thing Curtis Allen sent me a tweet or DM asking me about, these, across the body throws when he's booting, the back shoulder or back concepts that are kind of coming across. And you don't want to discourage your quarterback from hitting those because there will be times where those will be open. But right now what you're seeing to the point of the finger getting on the ball and some of these throws he's making, defensive backs and linebackers are almost hesitating to chase him because they're waiting for that throw to be thrown back if they've got the front side of the concept covered. And that's where, to your point, Sam's got to start using his legs. Like, go get 5 yards, go get 7 yards on a scramble, and put yourself in second and short or whatever it may be. Because when you start doing that and teams start now becoming fearful of you turning in those, plays, still in the positives, that will then open up that backside climb route that usually is the concept, whether it's a drive, whether it's a dagger concept, whatever it is. You usually, if you're booting your QB, have 2 in-breaking routes coming from the backside of the action. That's something I think Sam needs to work on. I think that's something that they probably need to kind of enforce in Sam a little bit. Like, hey, you don't have to try and throw it to everybody. Take off. If Sam Darnold had a stat line of 3 rushes for 17 yards in a game, I'm going to be okay with that, because I know those are probably off of boots, and it'll open up something backside. Because right now, teams are almost anticipating, if we take away his first and second read on the front side, he's turning and throwing right back into the middle of that field, or the quasi middle of the field, on these boot plays. So that's something to coach up. But again, like JSN, you can't really say much more than the guy has proved everything that we were all concerned about. He's proved us all wrong, and people that were concerned, can he be a receiver 1? How good is JSN? Like, he's proven he's a top 5 receiver in the NFL, if not a top 3 right now.
Well, this year he's been the best receiver in the league.
Yeah.
It's not even close. I think when Justin Jefferson has an NFL level quarterback with him, then he would probably take the top spot, but he doesn't. So therefore, Smith and Jigba is the king. And if he gets, if he breaks Calvin Johnson's record, which is a distinct possibility at this point, I think he has to win Offensive Player of the Year. He will get MVP votes. Will he win the MVP? Absolutely not. But will he get MVP votes? When by that I mean like 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place votes. He should. That's how good he's been. And I argue this because without him, I think this is a bottom 10 passing offense, because there is just so little productivity out of receiver 2 and below right now. And especially with Horton out, they're getting almost nothing out of Kupp and Shaheed for now, and then everybody else below him, like Bobo and Cody White. It is the Smith and Jigba show, and they're having to fill in gaps by excuse me, throwing it to Barner more, or throwing it to the running backs more, because the receiver productivity outside of Smith and Jigba has a steep drop off. But Smith and Jigba's got everything that you would want in a wide receiver, except maybe world-class Olympic sprinter speed. He's got the route running. He's got the hands. He's got the subtle movements. He might have gotten away with an offensive interference on that touchdown. Certainly extended the arm, but it was so subtle that you would not really complain about it live. He's just a master of his craft, and he's done it so rapidly. Like, this is not linear progression. This is exponential progression. He's going from decent rookie year, played way too close to the line of scrimmage and wasn't really much of a factor down the field as a first-year player, to 100 catches in his second season. Now we're seeing him expand the route tree a little bit more, but it feels like there's something just missing there, preventing him from being a truly elite receiver too. Well, no questions asked, no more doubts. This dude's an elite receiver. And the connection between him and Sam Darnold has been otherworldly. Like, we remember Wilson to Baldwin in 2015 and Wilson to Lockett in 2018. This is better than both of those, which is insane to think about. And the fact that a Seahawks receiver is the best in the league right now and has a shot to break what to me looked like, even with a 17-game season, a record that would stand the test of time, or at least not be broken for a long time, is incredible. And he's doing it in a low-volume passing offense. Like, some of the reason why he hasn't had more receiving yards is because they've been in games where Sam Darnold's thrown 12 passes or 20 passes or 25 passes, and they're up by 30 points, and there's no need to throw it to him more. So, yeah, Smith and Jigba is absolutely phenomenal. And to me, the best throw that Darnold made was first play of the second half. They run that play action. This is where Darnold's legs are an asset. There's a little bit of pressure because A.J. Barner doesn't get his blocking all that well. Darnold is able to use his legs, step up, make that throw to his left. He's so good at throwing to his left as a right-handed quarterback, as those you've noted and as others have noted to me on social media, in stride to Smith and Jigba. I mean, it's just a thing of beauty. And the explosive passing attack that we didn't really think much of with Smith and Jigba. Those first couple of seasons, he wasn't lighting it up with explosive plays, and certainly not with long air yards. And he's doing it all. I mean, it is insane what Smith and Jigba has produced, and to think that the best might be yet to come. Nobody's been able to stop him. Houston has got an amazing defense, and they gave up well over 100 and a touchdown to him. The Rams held him in the sense that he got 9 for 105. and really only had one super big play. I think that he's going to break Megatron's record. I thought for sure he would have had some sort of down game where he's held to like 3 catches for 37 yards. Nope, not even close. And now they have some bad, they're in the middle of a stretch of bad teams now. So that's all the more reason to think that he can feast against the rest of the NFL. Like his contract extension, I know, Schneider's like, we wait until the last year of their deal. Do not wait with Jackson Smith-Njigba. Extend him next offseason. Let him be the highest paid receiver in the league. He's already earned it.
Yeah, and I think Brady Henderson kind of made a comment or tweeted that or something that he's got a feeling that Witherspoon and JSN are both probably going to be guys that get extended early than their windows. But yeah, no, like the thing for me with this whole topic of Darnold and JSN is we're talking about guys that have only really been together for half of a season and off season, like half a year really, where they've worked together because they haven't had a full, like they had one full off season together, but that's like getting to know each other and what each other does. And this is what they're producing. And to your point, we're not a high volume passing attack. We're not throwing it 45 times consistently every week. To now looking at like what's next year going to look like with these two, especially if Shaheed gets more involved in this offense and they start incorporating some of these other weapons to alleviate what should be double coverage on JSN, which still doesn't really matter at this point. It'll be very interesting to see what this team and this passing game looks like going forward into the rest of this season and into the rest of, JSN's career here in Seattle with Darnold. It's definitely impressive, and I agree with you. Pay the guy. Like, there's no questions asked. Just pay the guy. And Mookie, the one thing I'll say about JSN that I also appreciate with him being literally the top receiver in the NFL, there's no diva vibe with him where you see some of these other guys complain about getting the ball and pouting when they don't get the ball. Like if JSN had a game, to your point, of 3 yards or 3 catches for 36 yards and the Seahawks still win that game, he's not going to care. That's not his thing. He wants to win championships. That's what he's most concerned about. He's come out and said it. All the other stuff's just an added bonus for him. And I think that, again, just speaks to who he is and where he's come from. And I think one thing we can talk about a little bit, I think this ends the debate on who the best receiver to come out of Ohio State, out of that class that was there of Olave and Garrett Wilson and all, and I'm trying to think, Marvin Harrison Jr. was there. Like, it's JSN. And some of those guys would even have said that back then, that it was JSN, even though they were more highly recruited. JSN is the best receiver to come out of Ohio State, I'd say, in the last 10 years.
Well, of course, he also had the Rose Bowl game of all Rose Bowl games, 15 for 347 and 3 touchdowns in that shootout with Utah. And of course, Michael Thomas has the receptions record. That's another Ohio State receiver, but he fell off real quick after that, all the injuries and everything. And then the derogatory slant boy nickname that was it Carlton Davis gave him. And also Emeka Ibuka is another one who could hit that JSN trajectory, I believe. He is that good too, as Seahawks fans also know all too well. But Smith-Njigba he's prodigious, he's special. And in a way, Seattle losing that wild card game to the 49ers might have stung in the present. But had they won that game, they had no shot at JSN because they would have been picking 4 or 5 spots higher. And he might have gone to the Chargers, for example. It's an interesting thing because the Chargers took Quentin Johnson with the next pick, and he's much closer to being off that team than anything else. That was the run of JSN, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison. And Addison's had his troubles, and he also had no catches last week, although I suspect that's not entirely his fault. Some of it is. And then Zay Flowers is an all right receiver, but he's like more of a gadget guy to me. And a guy who's like he's a true number one for Baltimore, but I don't think he's an exceptional talent. Smith-Njigba looks like somebody who could be a Hall of Fame level player. And when you consider, and I posited this on Twitter, that Steve Largent was not drafted by the Seahawks, and that often gets lost to history. People just assume that because Largent played his entire career there, that he got drafted by them. Nope. Smith-Njigba could end up within, if not this year, then by next year, the greatest receiver the Seahawks have ever drafted. I mean, DK, of course, is up there because of his successes. Joey Galloway had a lot of success in this league, but he never had a Pro Bowl appearance despite like 800 catches in his career. And then we know he left pretty early. And then, of course, you've got Brian Blades as another one for the Seahawks. Tyler Lockett, of course, would, I think, be the standard. But Like, he could be tearing Lockett's records apart in a matter of a few seasons at this rate. He's going to easily beat Lockett's single season receptions record. And Lockett was amazing in his prime, but he was never the best receiver in the league. And JSN is.
I think for me, if I was to, and this deviates a little bit, and we'll talk about the running game here shortly, but I think if I had to look at Seahawks receivers and go, who are like, if I'm picking, like if I'm going to go in a 4 receiver set and I'm going to have 2 and 2 on each side, I got JSN, I've got Steve Largent, I have Tyler Lockett, and I have Doug Baldwin. For guys that were like basically played their whole career mainly in Seattle, and that was it. Like, I get Tyler's gone off, and Steve Largent, I think he started in Houston, if I'm not mistaken, right? He was originally in Houston and then came in the expansion draft to Seattle. But like, don't get me wrong, I love what DK did, but like, I just look at those guys and I look at what they were able to do and all the limitations that, for say, were put on them. Like, Steve Largent wasn't supposed to be this, speed guy, or wasn't going to be this great receiver. Doug Baldwin was what Doug Baldwin was. Tyler Lockett was small. And like, DK had a lot of the things going for him. He had the size, the speed, all the things you want in a big receiver and a number one guy. And the 4 guys I listed there, everyone had an issue with them at some point. 2 are undrafted. 1 was a mid-round pick. And yes, one went, pick 20 in the first round. But all we heard was JSN solely a slot guy. He can't do anything else that play in the slot. Well, sorry, NFL, that guy can play anywhere. And like he said at his, I believe it was his draft interview when after you get drafted, he said, I'm a receiver. If they want to put me in the slot, cool, I can do things there. If they want to put me outside, I can do things there. I am a receiver. And it's proved in the pudding this year. So let's move on here, Mookie. Let's finally talk about a ground game that got some movement. And, not that it hasn't gotten movement, but it had more consistency and less going backwards, I felt, in this game. This is the first game I've seen in a while where we didn't see K9 going massively backwards. And I'll be honest, this is the first time, one of my favorite runs in this game, Mookie, I believe it was a 1-yard run by Kenneth Walker. I want to say it was in the second quarter. And they basically were in I formation, and Robbie Oots missed his block. And the guy comes in, and K9 sidesteps him, and he kind of trips him up. But instead of doing what K9's done so, recently and go and try and reverse field and go back the other way, he stayed with the run, and he managed to get a yard or 2 out of it by still going through that trajectory into that spot. To me, that shows some growth in K9's game, in his understanding of what this offense is asking of him to do now in this running game. And I think, when you look at where he's been, what he's kind of the systems he's gone through, now that he's buying into, I think, what they're doing and understanding what they're asking him to do, like, you put up some clips this week of that game, and he's seeing the cutback lane so much better than he did like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and hitting it and taking off.
Oh, absolutely. And as I noted, all of his runs, except one, I might have erroneously said that was inside the tackles. I think I might have meant to say inside the tackle box, essentially. It might have been one of those, might have been a split zone one. And then he's able to cut back to the outside, to the inside of AJ Barner's shoulder, and just took off for 15 yards. I mean, the blocking, of course, was very, very good. And the only reason why the running game didn't, again, look more gaudy is because they didn't have a whole lot of plays. Kenneth Walker had 11 carries, Charbonnet had 6. If that was a game that was more competitive, or the Seahawks didn't score in 3-play drives, then I think they would have been able to do kind of what they did against Arizona in the second game, which is pounded down their throats with run after run after run, and Tennessee wouldn't have been able to do much to stop it. Running between Cross and Zabel has again continued to prove hugely successful. And at the first play of the game, they get a 10-yard run because they shift Cooper Kupp in motion. Titans end up shifting in Kupp's direction. So Seattle's basically got a numbers advantage, and Walker's able to just run right. Not saying it's like Jones and Hutch, but just to see a hole for Kenneth Walker to run through is a delightful sight for sore eyes after years of him getting met by 5-6 defenders at the backfield. Now, it's still happening in this game, admittedly. Like, Jeffrey Simmons had a couple of plays where he was in the backfield fast. Walker couldn't do much of anything. Simmons gave that work to everybody on the interior line. He gave it to Zabel, Olu, and Bradford all at least once. But he's one of the best in the business. But I am encouraged by the way that Walker is looking the last couple of weeks. And I think they used Charbonnet pretty well in this game. I like Charbonnet's touchdown run, actually, because Utz did not block his guy well.
No,
and it forced
he missed
Charbonnet
his block, in my opinion.
he missed it badly, and that forced Charbonnet to go outside. And the Titans linebacker, I think his name is Armour Davis, hyphenated, he was not able to contain that edge, and Charbonnet was able to beat him to the outside, and he's able to get into the end zone. So, the running game I thought was quite effective, and what we're not seeing yet are those 40, 50-yard runs that we absolutely adored seeing from Kenneth Walker in his first season. But to see even like chunk plays, 11 yards, 15 yards there, that's going to be important down the line, so that if Seattle's passing game has a game that's like the Rams game or the 49ers game where it's not very sharp, they have something to fall back on. And this under center stuff is starting to look a little bit cleaner. They're moving some things, kind of reducing some certain calls out of the playbook. Like they're not just spamming as much outside zone as they have been throughout the season because it's just not been efficient. They're still doing it, but not at the same level. I think that running between the tackles is, to me, where Kenneth Walker can be at his best in this scheme. And he's, as you said, he's reading blocks better. His vision looks good. He's finding those cutback lanes. He's being patient. So Walker, to me, is the undisputed top back on this team. There's still space for Charbonnet, and it's going to be those two moving forward, knowing that Holani's probably not going to get any run anytime soon. But I think they can commit to this run game a little bit more. And there will be opportunities against teams like Atlanta's got a bad run defense. Their pass defense is much improved, but the run defense gave up 200 plus to Jonathan Taylor not too long ago. And the Vikings, as part of their fall off this year, their run defense has struggled. And they gave up, I think, over 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns to Emmanuel Wilson. So there will be chances for the Seahawks in the next few weeks to commit to that running game. And for Kenneth Walker to, I think, maybe have at least one 100-yard rushing game. He's only had one this season against Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be in line for another one within the next few weeks.
So just to give some numbers to the context of this running game in this game, to your point, Mookie, they didn't go over the top and push the outside zone as much. They didn't even run zone that much in this game. So Kenneth Walker had 2 true carries of inside zone and 2 true carries of outside zone. Charbonnet had 1 carry of inside zone and 2 carries of outside zone. That's it in the entire running game. What you saw more of in this game was you saw more man running. So in that sense, that's man to duo. And that's where Kenneth Walker had his 7 other carries for his 11 of 71 yards, which I think is your point of seeing them mix it up now, going, hey, we can't just do this. We need to mix. We can still have that identity and still do that. Because if you look at it in total, you have 4, 5, 7 between the 2 backs, zone reps, and then you had 8 man reps. Now, Charbonnet also had, 1 power run in there, which is fine, which was a short yardage run, but that's the kind of thing you want to see from this team. You want to see them start to kind of figure out what they're good at. And sometimes it's matchup dependent too. But the fact is you had 2 running backs with over 5 yards per carry as an average in a game. You can't really, scoff at that because it goes over 100 yards between the 2 of them. Ken had 79. Sharps had 35. You're over 100 yards running the ball on 17 carries. That's a pretty good statistical number in a game where, again, you pointed out earlier, Mookie, they only had 48 plays.
And I also want to point out Anthony Bradford had a pretty good game, and he needed it because that Rams game was ugly. So he needed to step up, and there was rightful worry because you got Sweat and Simmons there. But in the run blocking, I thought he was really good. He might have had 1 or 2 bad reps on whether against the run or against the pass. He certainly had one on that one where Walker did have to bounce it out of necessity because Bradford just didn't lay but one hand on Simmons. Simmons got in so quickly. Walker bounced it, but overall, I thought Bradford played all right, and I'll take all right over oh no, which is what we got in the Rams game. So, and I think Gray Zabel needs serious kudos for going the distance after it looked like he was going to be screwed, and Seattle's offensive line might be screwed when he hurt his knee last Sunday. So he goes all the way, and for the most part, he looked good. And then Cross and Lucas, I thought were really sound both in pass pro and against the run. So I thought it was mostly a good day for the offensive line in the sense that they were effective as run blocking in the run blocking game. and Darnold, for the most part, was kept clean and not under constant pressure. So I will take that. I'm not expecting the best line on the league, but the low sack rate continues for Darnold, and the run blocking is slowly but surely getting a little bit better. I mean, they had some success against that stingy Rams defense. They had 200 yards or thereabouts against Arizona, and now they have well over 100 against Tennessee, and it was on a low volume rushing attack. So maybe we're just starting to see the tide turn a little bit in Seattle's favor. And while I can't prove this, maybe this is the benefits of Oluwatimi being in there, not Sundell.
I was honestly about to say that because I think Olu has made a difference as a pass blocker. And, looking at his, stats so far, like, okay, it's not overly the greatest, but his run blocking grade is one of the better ones. And that's what you're seeing pick up here. Like, he's starting to move people in this run game, which I think in turn is then helping your pass game. Now, again, we're talking about a guy that's in his, second half of starting another second half of a season. So we'll have a full sample size. You take what he did last year stepping in for Connor Williams and what he's doing now. I don't know if Sundell is healthy in a couple of weeks. Does he all of a sudden come back and take that job if the offense is humming along the way it is with having an effective run game and the passing game not taking a hit in protection?
I think you ride with a hot hand. It wasn't like Oluwatimi lost a job due to performance. He just wasn't on the field. He got hurt. So in this situation, I think that you stay with Oluwatimi because Sundell's problem is he might be the better athlete, but he gets overpowered too much and loses at the point of attack too much. And both against the run and against the pass. Olu's had his ugly reps as well, including even in the Tennessee game. But I feel like the line is a little bit more cohesive with him in the lineup than with Sundell, who I feel could be at somewhat of a strength disadvantage. So Olu might not climb to the second level as quickly as Sundell could, but if you're getting beat in the first level, then it doesn't matter. You're not going to make the second level. So yes, I think that you stick with Olu moving forward and until proven otherwise. I think he has earned his reps moving forward. And again, we don't know how long Sundell is going to be out. I think the earliest he can come back is week 15. And so that gives you 3 regular season games or 4 regular season games to go. I think that's as long as Oluwatimi stays healthy and doesn't look like a total liability out there, he's earned that job. He has taken it away from Sundell after not winning. Sundell, I'm not sure totally won the job emphatically over Oluwatimi as much as he just won it out of a combination of he looked good in preseason and Oluwatimi wasn't there as a counter to counter with anything. So in this instance, Sundell has this half season's worth of tape on him, and now we're starting to see what Oluwatimi looks like under the same circumstances.
Agreed. Well, let's quickly touch on this, Mookie. The defense delivers again, right? Like, yes, the Titans were able to come back, but you saw guys like Patrick O'Connell. You saw Drake Thomas again do his thing. Like, Drake Thomas, I think, has kind of solidified himself as a starting caliber linebacker in the NFL, as much as to some people's dismay, that may be the truth. But again, you look at the secondary, Reek Woolen had a good game. Kobe Bryant had a good game. Even DeAnthony Bell, when he had to step in, yeah, it took him some time, but he got his bearings underneath him. And Ty Okada was playing well up until his injury. This defense, again, it'll be interesting to see what happens this week with some of the injury report stuff. I'm sure we'll hear about tomorrow with our Knight and Jones able to come back. But overall, what did you think of the defense's performance?
They did a little bit of bending, but not breaking. I mean, that first drive, they did the extreme bend, but don't break. That I'm sure would have people harken back to their complaints about Pete Carroll, but it worked. I mean, 9.5 minutes to only kick a field goal at the 3-yard line. That does not feel like a successful drive to me. And next thing you know, Seattle in a few plays gets a field goal right back. So like if you're going to take all that time off the clock and not get 7, I feel like that's a waste. O'Connell looked good, and they also, I don't want to say hit him, but they helped him by playing a whole lot of dime. And even when they were nickel, it was almost like it was 5-5-1-5, where Thomas is the only off-ball linebacker, and then you would have even more either being kind of lined up as a linebacker or just in his normal in the box safety role. So O'Connell played 40-something snaps. Thomas played all of them. And you're right. Drake Thomas might not be an all-pro, Pro Bowl or anything, and maybe in a different scheme, some of his weaknesses would be more pronounced. But in Mike McDonald's scheme, and to do this without Ernest Jones, he's a starting caliber linebacker, and his downhill abilities are really fun to watch. He likes to be a thumper in the run game. He's an undersized guy at the position, if I'm not mistaken, but he can hit. O'Connell was delivering licks too. He started the game inauspiciously by getting pump faked by Cam Ward on the scramble, and I thought, oh, are we in for one of those days where they say find that guy because he hasn't been playing a lot? But then he gets a sack at Cam Ward. He gets a run stop. Drake Thomas has a run stop. So the linebacker play has held up quite well in the absence of Jones, and then with Tyrese Knight getting concussed. And I think Knight will be back next week or this week. Jones, we're still kind of waiting and seeing. I'm just hoping it was precautionary last week, that it's just the Titans. They can afford to hold him out a week as opposed to rushing him back, because he really didn't look good against the Rams. He was not 100%. And some of the run fits that they were giving, some of the explosive runs that they were giving up were Jones uncharacteristically not being there in time. I thought that the pass defense did a good job for the most part of preventing the big play down the field. They gave up some explosives on scramble drills, extended plays. Some of that you got to tip your hat to Cam Ward. Some of it you have to acknowledge that Seattle just does not have an elite finisher at the edge position. Like, kudos to Derek Hall for finally getting a sack. That's his first of the season. But neither he nor Mafe is amazing at close. They're not Myles Garrett. They're not Trey Hendrickson. They're not Micah Parsons. They're not Nick Bonito. They're not that level of guy who, if they're near you, you're going to get sacked. So, I mean, it's worked for Seattle thus far. But I think some of those plays where Ward escaped would have been sacks if they were truly high-end pass rushers. But the defensive line still dominated. Running game didn't get going. You had Leonard Williams get another sack. Byron Murphy get another sack. McDonald blitzed, I think, a healthy amount. Certainly Devin Witherspoon would have had the sack if Murphy didn't get there, because Witherspoon was getting held like crazy by Tajay Spears, and they didn't call it at all. I thought Reek Woolen had a very good game again. I think Reek, since that, I don't want to say benching because it really wasn't a benching, but Reek over the last few weeks has played a lot closer to his best form, not just in coverage, but also he's limited the penalties and he's tackling very well. So that's been really good to see, very encouraging to see. And Witherspoon he's been Witherspoon. He had a couple of nice pass breakups. So Tennessee may have gotten 24 points, but remember, one was off a punt return touchdown, and another one's right at the end of the game with a half minute left. So in the normal flow of the game, they had 10 points really on offense when the game was still reasonably in doubt. And that's what you would expect. Tennessee's offense is last in the league in points. So 17 points out of their offense when you take away the punt return touchdown, I think that's fine, especially on 4-point-something yards per play. They had to earn it. They didn't get a lot of easy yards. And that's as well you could have possibly asked for an undermanned Seahawks defense. If Ernest played, if Julian Love was back, if Jaron Reed was back so they wouldn't have to play Murphy and Williams as many snaps as they're playing, they would be limiting them even more, guaranteed. Another person I want to shout is Brandon Peely. And you and I and Dan Vians and Brandon Kane, we were gushing over him, watching him in preseason. And of course, locally, he is from the high school. He went to high school not too far from where I live here in Oregon. So he's got some local interest here, but he's making some good plays as a nose tackle, playing 15 snaps a game. I think that fourth down stop was his penetration. I don't remember if he got the tackle, but he certainly created the situation for that fullback Chestnut to get stopped. And that's the second time that's happened. He did it against Arizona on that goal line stand, 4th and goal. He gets into the backfield. And I think Tyler Cott ends up cleaning up the play right at the 1-yard line. So Peely is I think, a good rotational player. And I believe that, especially with some of the roster decisions upcoming, Patrick O'Connell's also played his way onto this active roster because he's out of elevations. So they might as well just sign him to the active roster now.
I think that's what you saw with the move today. So, Mookie, let's kind of touch on that. Obviously, with the defense, we just finished having you discuss and break it all down. But one of our shining stars from the past 5 seasons has come back to Seattle in Quandre Diggs. And, I look at this and I go, you and me talked about it when it kind of got announced by Quandre because he doesn't need sources. To me, this is a ideal signing of getting someone in the building that you don't have to really coach up. He's a veteran player. Yes, he'll have to learn the system and how it works. But the biggest thing for me about having Quandre here, if Tyler Cott is out for a significant amount of time and maybe Julian Love's not ready to come back, I do expect to see DeAnthony Bell start this game if Julian Love is not back off of IR, and that they go with DeAnthony Bell and Kobe Bryant back there with Eamon Wari. But the biggest thing here, and I think you can agree with me on this, Quandre Diggs playing behind a competent defense in front of him might make Quandre Diggs look a little bit better than what had happened the last few years in Seattle, where basically it was Swiss cheese and wet cardboard in front of him, and he was trying to clean up a bunch of those messes.
Yeah, Quandre was never the best tackler, perfect form tackler you'll ever see, but free safeties are very rarely known for amazing tackling. And if they're that far, with Quandre those last few years, he was making some ugly misses for sure, taking some bad angles, but the fact that those plays even got to the free safety level that far down the field was a problem in itself. So I think that Diggs can also provide some veteran leadership too. He's got the deep experience in this league. He's played at a Pro Bowl level, like a true Pro Bowl level. I think the last one might have been a bit of a charity Pro Bowl, but he earned the 2020 Pro Bowl nod for sure. And he's got ball skills too. I mean, he had 18 interceptions with Seattle from 2019 and mid-season 2019 all the way through 2023. So Diggs is obviously going to be more in the backfield. He's not going to be playing down close to the line of scrimmage. That's very rarely been his game. But I don't see the harm in this. He's probably going to be on the practice squad. He'll get 3 elevations. And by then, I would assume that Julian Love would be back. Okada's a different story because he might go on injured reserve. Although Brady Henderson is saying that Okada's injury might not be as bad as feared, in which case I'm hoping it's like the Derek Hall injury where he missed essentially 3 weeks because he missed the Jaguars game.
Yeah,
and then
he
missed the Texans game. They had a bye week, and then he was back for the Commanders game.
Yeah.
So to me, I don't think they need IR if he's going to miss exactly 4. So, and if it's less than 4, then all the more reason to not put him on injured reserve. So, yeah, it's a nice, happy reunion, I think. If Quandre has got anything left in the tank, I think he does. And it's not like there's a gauntlet of offenses coming up the next couple of weeks. Certainly when the Colts and Rams come to town, then things get a little trickier. But by then, he might not even be needed because Love could be back by then. Certainly against Minnesota, which at this point does not have a functional passing game. And unless Max Brosmer has the most amazing debut we've seen in a long time, I doubt that Brosmer is going to do a whole lot better than JJ McCarthy. And then with Atlanta, like Kirk Cousins had some decent moments against the Saints, but it's the Saints. I think that Kirk Cousins could have another tough game against Seattle. So just these next couple of weeks, Quandre can be the unk in the building. He can be that substitute teacher that everybody loves, and he can make a play or two and not completely destroy the integrity of the structure of the defense. So I'm happy to see Quandre back. I know people got on him because of all the missed tackles and everything in the last couple of seasons, but people got to remember also his best years were on consistently bad defenses. Quandre was a bright spot. He got here in 2019 because Tedrick Thompson was stinking up the place. And then he got injured and put on injured reserve. And Quandre came in, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say he saved the season because Seattle barely made the playoffs, even as an 11-5 team with all the close wins. Diggs transformed that secondary just by being a good ball hawking free safety. So he doesn't have to be Pro Bowl Quandre. He just has to not suck. And I think he can not suck these next couple of weeks.
I agree. And I think the one thing about Mike's defense that, again, plays to some of Quandre's strength is a lot of zone stuff. It's a lot of cover 6. It's a lot of, staying in your zones, understanding where you're going to be and being in those spots. It's not a lot of man, and it's not a lot of base, cover 3 kind of stuff that we saw Pete run a lot of when he had Quandre and even some of the other stuff. But, and for a fact, if you listen to Mike McDonald I think it was on his show on 710, he mentioned how we don't actually in Seattle run a lot of sim pressures. People seem to think we do, but we just rush 4 with some added sauce, as he put it. He goes, we don't actually do the sim pressure as much as people think, which I found quite interesting. But Mookie, let's talk about this matchup a little bit here before we have one more topic. And then we got our 12s blitz that we always like to do with our Q&As. But what is your initial outlook of this matchup with the Vikings? Because I have mine, which I think this is going to be very different than the team that we saw last year. And I think it's going to be a very drastically different outcome than last year.
I would be surprised if this game came down to the wire. Like this Vikings team is on the precipice of collapse.
Yep.
They, to me, and Curtis Allen was the one who he should toot his own horn to his heart's content. He should get extra stuffing, extra turkey leg at Thanksgiving because he noted the Vikings spent a ton of money in free agency.
Yep.
And it wasn't just the offensive line. It wasn't just Ryan Kelly, who I'm pretty sure is still concussed. It wasn't just signing Will Fries and beating Seattle to the punch there. It was signing Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. And, they did rebuild the offensive line. They drafted Donovan Jackson in the first round. I think Jackson's been good. But they pushed in all their chips. This is not like a rebuilding team with a rookie quarterback. This is a team that was playoff caliber, 14-3. That gets you the 1 seed most years with Sam Darnold. They made the playoffs comfortably. They had the best defense or close to the best defense in the league. They had an elite offense. And then they hand the keys over to JJ McCarthy. Maybe they weren't wrong in moving on from Darnold because they had already drafted JJ and Darnold way overperformed expectations. But their downfall is going to be not having a true proper backup plan in case McCarthy actually wasn't good. Because you end up with the remnants of Carson Wentz, who was playing hurt, probably played hurt way too much, and now he's done for the year. You end up with Max Brosmer. And lest we forget, their original backup plan was Sam Howell, and Howell was so bad in preseason that they brought in Carson Wentz. So they screwed this up. They screwed up the quarterback situation and kind of put their eggs in the McCarthy basket. And McCarthy is looking so poor through 6 games. Now, I get it. Didn't play all of last year. He was hurt. He only played a bit of preseason before that injury. This is his first true season as a starter. But this is not like your other typical rookie quarterbacks whom, like Cam Ward, for example. Cam Ward is on a team with very little talent. So if they're going to fail, it's not because of Cam Ward. It's because of, even if Cam Ward has his rookie moments, he doesn't have a whole lot in front of him. J.J. McCarthy gets to inherit Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Nailey. He's got a very good receiving core, one of the best receivers in the league. He's got a rebuilt offensive line that's, when healthy, you got Darisaw as one of the best tackles in the league. You got a lot of talent on defense, and yet they're 4-7. McCarthy is not leading touchdown drives. He's thrown 10 interceptions. I think he's near the league lead, having barely played this season. Now he's in concussion protocol. So I think that the Seahawks have every reason to win this game comfortably. Whether it's Brosmer starting or whether it's J.J. McCarthy, one of those two is probably going to be rattled like hell going up against the Seahawks defense. And the Vikings also don't have a good enough run game to kind of alleviate the pressure off of whoever their starting quarterback is. Now, the Vikings defense, quietly, 18th in DVOA. They have dropped off. Now, some of it has been injuries, like losing Blake Cashman for several weeks. Not having Andrew Van Ginkel, I think, has been huge for them. Because to me, like KJ Wright was our screen whisperer. He is the screen killer. How many times has he jumped on a quick pass at the line of scrimmage and almost picked it or actually picked it? Like, he is such a dog. I love watching Van Ginkel play. But they don't have a great secondary. Harrison Smith is kind of seen as his better years now. Seattle's just a better team. They just are. And the Vikings, they were awful. I mean, Greg Olsen called it the worst half of football I think he's ever seen. They had, I think, 4 yards of offense. And Green Bay similarly has a very, very good defense. So I can only imagine what McCarthy could concoct for McCarthy or Brosmer or whomever. I'm kind of hoping it's McCarthy because with Brosmer, we don't know what he's like in terms of like a full game. But with McCarthy, I am pretty confident that this dude, at least for this season, needs so much work that he can barely run an offense right now.
Yeah, McCarthy to me just gives me massive Zach Wilson vibes.
He's another Trubisky right now. I mean, he can't throw to one side of the field. He's making panicky decisions with the ball. His footwork is all over the place. Like his upper body and lower body mechanics are going in totally opposite directions, and it's leading to horrible misfires. And he's not going through progressions all that well either.
Well, and the thing too, when I watched McCarthy coming out, there were things I did like about his tape. There were things that he could do with his mobility and in the boot game and so on. And I was like, yeah, if he's in the right system and he sits for 3 years, he could be a guy that you could eventually turn the keys over to. Not a guy you turn the keys over to essentially as a rookie because he missed all of last year with the knee. Now he's come in and the game's moving too fast for him, and you can see the game's moving too fast. We're talking about a guy that in college did not throw the ball more than like 22 to 25 times in the game. And that was a high amount of pass attempts for JJ McCarthy because they could run the ball so well with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. Like Jim Harbaugh does what he's done with quarterbacks in the past, whether it be Alex Smith or some of the other guys, and basically protected them from themselves and some of their deficiencies. And that's where you kind of seen, even with Herbert in LA, Jim has done a good job of kind of channeling Herbert from where he was kind of this, go crazy cowboy quarterback for a bit with the way he could use his rocket arm to now really funneling him in. And he's turned into an elite level quarterback that not that he wasn't before, but he's really refined that. And I think that's the problem for JJ. I just don't think he's in that, kind of ability. And now he's injured again or concussed. And it kind of makes you wonder, is it hey, you're concussed now because you are doing so badly, we need to save face and just say you had a bad season due to injuries and we can try and reboot this next year? Because like, say the Vikings bottom out here, Mookie, and they don't make the playoffs. Is Kevin O'Connell's job on the line? Because he stamped we're good with JJ McCarthy. Let's move on from Sam Darnold. JJ's my guy. When you look at last year and the way that it's kind of played out, the Vikings had the best quarterback room in the NFL with Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold, both there, and they let both of them out of that building, and both of them are doing quite well in their new destinations.
Daniel Jones could have worked fine in O'Connell's scheme. Now, all the injuries to the Vikings offensive line, I think that Jones could have had some reverting to Daniel Jones of the Giants. Make no mistake about it, the Vikings offensive line being beat up, and they could have a beat up offensive line this week. I don't know the status of Darrisaw, but if he can't go, I don't know what they're going to do, because when he's not been in the game, their backup left tackle has been rotten, like really poor. But yeah, with McCarthy, the thing that you mentioned is O'Connell kind of rubber stamped this as, hey, we got him in the first round, traded up to get him in the first round, might I add. And we're going to ride with him, even though Darnold had the season he had. Maybe one of the things is for Darnold, those last 2 weeks ended up being the best thing for the Seahawks because it lowered his value. And one of the worst things for the Vikings because they said, he's not the guy. We're going to go with the guy we took top 10 and start him in 2025. And this dude couldn't be any less ready. I mean, he's had like 4 good quarters of play out of 20 some odd. The fourth quarter against the Bears in the first game, maybe the last drive of the Bears game that in the rematch in Minneapolis, that they were down 16-3, at least 2 touchdown drives, and then they lose at the buzzer. And then I think about that first half of the Lions game. And you notice I only mentioned division games there. So like after that, it has been a nightmare for him. And with Kevin O'Connell, this dude got something out of Josh Dobbs showing up on like 6 minutes notice. And he got something out of Nick Mullins throwing for like 400 something yards. So
Jaron Hall.
And Jaron Hall, of course, Seahawks practice squad legend. So O'Connell is kind of in that Shanahan mold where, in his scheme, it's pretty quarterback friendly. But for McCarthy to be this bad, he's going to need one of the all-time like Goff-like turnarounds to salvage his career. Luckily, he's still very young, and they can kind of go at this next season. But what he's shown these first few weeks of his career is, I think, the worst case scenario for the Vikings, because this is not some podunk roster. This was a roster meant to push for the playoffs that a top 10 quarterback could inherit and step in and be seamlessly good. And it just hasn't happened. Justin Jefferson having 60 catches for 795 and 2 touchdowns through 11 games. He hasn't missed a game. That is disappointing. And it ain't because Justin Jefferson isn't getting open. It's just because the passes are sailing 10 feet over his head. Or he is open and their quarterbacks, whether it's McCarthy or Wentz, they're not seeing him. So I don't know if O'Connell's job is in jeopardy, but the GM that got an extension for this offseason, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, I don't know about that extension. Because when you think about that draft, they also traded up to get Dallas Turner too. And he's been considered a disappointment. And don't forget, they also traded, I think, next year's 4th rounder for Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen has 8 catches for 69 yards. So they could not have handled this offseason anywhere. So they went all in. They were looking for a receiver because Addison got suspended and Thielen is cooked. And they were looking to rebuild the offensive line. It's been injured. It hasn't been very good. They're looking to beef up their defensive line, and their run defense has not been great. They're not having the same pass rushing success they were having the previous year. So it's all caved in on them. So yeah, Seattle, especially with the throwbacks. One more time, we got the throwbacks here. I've got the throwback in my little screen there. I think that it's very possible that now that they're back at home, they could blow the Vikings out, kind of put the Minnesota Vikings out of their misery. Because I think that for the Vikings fans, they just want the season to be over. Like this is as bad as it could have been.
I would love for this game to have Sam throw for 300, not 44 attempts, but just 300 yards, a couple touchdowns, and have JSN go for over 200 and just be the perfect revenge game. That's it. You guys screwed up in the purple and yellow. You came in last year and Sam won you the game with Justin Jefferson, basically. Now turn around, and I saw someone sent me a hilarious like GIF meme of the Wolverine where he's like sitting on his bed and he's looking at the photo, and it's a photo of Sam in his Seahawk jersey, and Jefferson's cut himself out and put him on top of JSN. And I thought it was just such a perfect way of how Justin Jefferson is basically feeling right now. It was pretty good, but yeah, we'll definitely discuss this Vikings preview later on this week. When it gets close to the matchup, we'll do our live preview show as we always do, but I thought it'd be good to get Mookie's take on it a little bit now. But kind of an off topic here before we get to the 12's Q&A. What is going on in Las Vegas? Like, it is, we talk about the Vikings being a complete potential dumpster fire here. I don't know what you want to call the Raiders situation, because Pete has now fired 2 coordinators for the first time in season. Geno is not anywhere what he was in Seattle, and they may have the worst draft class of the NFL this year. In the respect of, they drafted for a team they thought was more on the precipice of being a playoff team, and the picks that they took and the guys that they took, and they needed to do more rebuilding than anything.
If the Raiders were like 7-10 to end this season, which will not be happening because they would have to win 5 out of the last 6. If the Raiders were 7-10 and Geno was kind of a bridge type quarterback, let's say he throws 25 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, has average to above average stats, and Pete has got the team looking like they're on the up and up, and like forget Geno's future, Pete has got them on the right track to being good again, that would be one thing. I thought, and I said it on Las Vegas radio a few months back, Pete and Geno are floor raisers. That's going to be my worst take of 2025, bar none. I'm not sure I'll be allowed back on radio in Las Vegas ever again. I could step foot at Harry Reid International. I don't know if they call it Harry Reid International McCarran, but I could step foot in Las Vegas airport and they would escort me back on the plane to head back to Oregon, because I obviously gave bad advice. I cannot fathom how badly this has gone. And I don't see why Carroll should get another year, because he normally doesn't fire coaches in season. He never did it in Seattle. Like, no, as much as it felt like justifying firing Bevel at any given loss, he never did it. He never fired Norton midseason. He fired guys after the season for sure, but fired a special teams coordinator, which admittedly he kept from the Antonio Pierce days. But he hired Chip Kelly. He pushed for Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was the highest paid coordinator in the league. Off of what? His college success? Because in the NFL, his stuff got figured out. His 7 seconds or less hurry up offense after that first year and a half, it got figured out. And then they gave him, front office powers, and then the house of cards collapsed. To disastrous tenure with the 49ers, a pretty bad tenure in UCLA, certainly those last few years. He wins a national championship at Ohio State, which is cool. I mean, you look at Ohio State and they got Henderson, and they have 2 top 15, maybe 2 future top 10 running backs right now in Judkins and Henderson. You've got future first round pick Jeremiah Smith on it. They got a loaded offense, and talent means so much more in college than it does in the NFL, and that gap matters. Chip ends up looking like a fish out of water in the NFL again. I don't think he's ever going to get another job in the NFL, honestly speaking. I'm not sure he even wants it. He might just be more comfortable hanging out in the college scene moving forward. But for Pete, his offensive line coach is Brennan Carroll, and you see the status of that offensive line, whether they're healthy or not. And then their passing game, their quarterback's assistant coach or like passing game coordinator, whoever, is Nate Carroll. So it has to irk Raiders fans that this Nepo baby situation has risen, and they just look poorly coached. That defense is actually a little bit below average and not awful, but you see some of the missed tackling. There are too many things that are going on in Vegas that are like the worst extreme versions of why Carroll was moved on from in Seattle. The missed tackling, giving up long drives, 8-minute scoring drives, being bad in the red zone, being bad on third down. There's no cohesiveness to this team whatsoever, and it sucks. Whatever you think of Geno, because as great a story as Geno was, they never won a playoff game with him. There doesn't have to be the same attachment to Geno as there was to other Seahawks who were part of the Super Bowl teams. We have every reason to be attached to Pete Carroll because, yes, 49 is going to live in the minds of Seahawks fans forever. I think it kind of broke this fan base a bit just as much as it broke the team. But 48 happened. First ever Super Bowl win. Beastquake happened. Iconic, one of the greatest playoff upsets of all time. He's given us so many great memories. And even if he hung on a little bit too long, I would have rather seen him never coach again than do what he's doing right now and possibly risk damaging his legacy. Like the best case scenario for him is that this is treated like when George Seifert coached the Carolina Panthers for a very short period of time, and that was a total mess. But Seifert won a couple of Super Bowls, and nobody necessarily thinks of Seifert as an all-time coach as much as a guy who inherited Bill Walsh's teams. But with Pete Carroll, this guy has won a national championship at USC. He's won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, something that you very rarely see. To win a national title and a Super Bowl, what, 2 coaches have ever done it? Him and Jimmy Johnson. I'm trying to think. Was there a third? Switzer? Yeah,
yes, Switzer. There you go.
And again, another person who inherited a loaded team and inheriting Jimmy Johnson's squad. So with Carroll, I think the problem with him is the bad things the things that we criticize about him in Seattle. They were not exacerbated because the team was at least good enough to not bottom out. In this instance, the bad things that are happening are getting more exposed because that roster is poor. Now, he's not the front office guy. John Spytek is. He doesn't have those same powers. But as you said, they're getting nothing out of that draft class. Genty has not been efficient. It's not his fault. They've got 2 offensive linemen they drafted within, the first few rounds who are not seeing the field. Jack Besh, taken in the second round, had a little bit of involvement the first couple of weeks. He's not seeing the field. Dante Thornton, not seeing the field. And that's another familiar kind of complaints about Carroll in Seattle among some Seahawks fans. He's not playing the young guys. Well, they're 2-9 now. I don't know what you have to lose playing these young guys at this point and playing out the string. And then there's the Geno Smith question. And I know people have probably seen him flip off that Raiders fan. He, to me, is playing very frustrated, undisciplined football. Like he's trying to go for the home run every time. And he is now he's trying to cash checks that his arms cannot write. I think his arm strength has declined. Certainly the Raiders receiving core is not the best, but for Brock Bowers to not have gaudy stats with him when he was having an amazing, one of the greatest rookie seasons we've ever seen with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as his quarterbacks last year, a good chunk of that has to go on Geno. He looks like a quarterback in decline. It looks like he's almost reverting to Jets form at times. And to me, if Pete wasn't the coach and Geno was the quarterback, I think another coach would have benched him by now. And with O'Connell seemingly getting closer to getting healthy again because of his thumb injury, I think they should just consider benching Geno. Like he's not shown enough to justify. All of his metrics are in the bottom. When he had the pick problem last year, he was doing some other things that were at least showing that there were some good quarterback play there, but there were the circumstances around him. The circumstances around him in Vegas obviously are sucky, but he's also adding to the fire with his decision-making. And these picks are not unlucky picks. Some of them aren't. A lot of these picks are him just making terrible reads or being late on a throw to Tyler Lockett to win a game in Jacksonville against Jacksonville. He hitches one time, defensive lineman reads, and he can bat the ball down. He's just been a total mess there. So I'd like to think that, no, this is not how Geno's always been. It is a case where John Schneider was right to move on from Geno and not try and coax him and says, come on, we absolutely want you to stay. And then from the ownership standpoint, they were right to move on from Pete as well. Doesn't take away Pete's accomplishments, but they were right to move on.
Agreed. And like, just to preface this, I think there's a couple things from, I saw in the chat here, why doesn't Pete do what he did when he came to Seattle and do the 200 transactions? Pete's not looking to rebuild. Pete wanted to come in and basically start pushing a team into the playoff picture. He's not, I think, just in that spirit of, hey, I got to do a full rebuild, where when he came to Seattle, it was that, hey, there's a 10-year plan here. I'm going to rebuild this thing in my image and go. The other thing that I just, with Pete this year, that I just find absolutely asinine is how he's, and again, it's partly to do with his son, Carroll, or Brennan Carroll, the O-line coach. You have Jackson Powers Johnson there, right? He is a center. He played well to the back end of the season. JPJ did at center last year for you. And you put him at guard. And then he gets injured. And the guy that you claimed had to be your center in Meredith, you now move him to guard and bring Kappa and put him at center. Like, what are you doing, Pete? Like, if this guy was supposed to be your center, then why are you now exchanging him out when he's not injured and putting him at guard and bringing a guy that hasn't taken any snaps at center and putting him at center? Like, it's things like that with Pete where, and then he sits up there and he tries to keep justifying Geno. Like, to your point, put Aiden O'Connell in there. Aiden O'Connell, in my opinion, he is a better bridge option quarterback than Geno Smith is at this point. And try your luck. Like, I agree with you. I don't think Pete gets another year. And I think this might be the final time where the Raiders go, okay, we are tearing this right down to the studs. And that may mean jettisoning star players. And like we heard about, you and me both through our sources that are connected, Seattle was very much in on Max Crosby, and the Raiders were very much in some aspects of their front office, very much into dealing him. And Pete was kind of the one that didn't want it to go through because Pete still thought, hey, Pete's not there. I think there's a higher chance that gets signed off on in some respects. And to be, on another point, and I'll just say this before we kind of, with this Raider situation, before we move off of it, I think it might be time for, Mark Davis to look at selling this team. Like, the legacy will still be there of his dad, but like, sell this team and bring in a new ownership group because it's just not getting any better.
No. And the thing is, he runs the WNBA team very well. They just won another title. But as far as the football, he's not any better than Leighton Liefau Davis. And in many cases, he's worse because they fire Pete unless he is coaxed into resigning, so they don't have to pay him the rest of his contract. They could be paying like 4 coaches at this point.
Yeah,
not good for them. Whether it's McDaniels, Pierce, and Gruden, I think they're still paying. And now you're looking at Pete. So yeah, Pete's and Belichick are having their respective kind of disastrous seasons, but with Belichick, I think people just dislike Belichick, and there are many reasons to dislike him in terms of his personality. But with Pete, you want him to succeed because he's like the world's oldest teenager. But all that raw positive stuff doesn't hit when you're 2-9. And I wonder how much this losing affects him mentally. And it's not out of a point of welfare check concern, but he's never been this bad before. He's never had a team worse than 10 losses. 6-10 with the Jets and got him fired in a year, and 7-10 in 2021. Everything else, he has been no worse than 7-9 in college or the pros. He's normally been around 500 or better. You look at the rest of their schedule. They've got the Chargers this weekend, I believe. They've got another Denver game. They've got the Chiefs one more time. They've got Philadelphia and Houston. Like, only the Giants look like a team they could possibly beat. And that's only because the Giants have a sick addiction to blowing double-digit leads. Otherwise, they could lose out. And the way the Titans are playing, I think the Titans are good enough to win another game or maybe 2. It is not inconceivable that the Raiders end up owning the number 1 pick in this draft. And that, to me, would be, maybe it's a good thing for the Raiders down the line. Maybe Fernando Mendoza is their savior and they can rebuild properly. But that would be an epic failure for Pete and company. Because whatever you think of Geno, I don't think that they hired Pete and traded for Geno with the thought of, hey, if we're 5-12 or 4-13, no big deal. They expected competence, and they're not getting it.
Agreed. Well, Mookie, we've kind of rambled on here for a bit, but let's talk to our 12s that are in the chat. We've got quite a few of them in here. We got about 926 watching, and always appreciate your guys' support. And if you haven't and you like the content here, make sure you subscribe. Let's start with Dennis here, Mookie. He goes, Bryce, do you think Mike McDonald will get the team ready? The Vikings have been losing, but have quality players. I think we touched on it. I think this Vikings team is basically falling apart now. It's just literally falling apart. Like, you can't even get what's that tape stuff? that you slap on things to hold things together. What's it called?
Yeah, the gorilla glue.
Yeah, Gorilla Glue or whatever it's called. I can't even remember what it's called. It's some commercial, and the guy takes like a wad of duct tape and slaps it on a thing to hold it together. The Vikings are, I think, past that at this point. If they have to start Bosmer in this game, it could get ugly, and it could get ugly fast.
Yeah, I think it's flex tape.
That's it. Thank you, flex tape.
I mean, the Vikings still have guys. They got Grenard. They've got they got pieces on that defense, but they've underperformed. It's the offense, and the offense, of course, has got pieces. But I think what McDonald is going to be focused on is clean up those penalties, because as much as Torbert's crew just will throw a flag at anything, a lot of those penalties weren't. You can't have 3 false starts, and you have multiple times where you're lining up in the neutral zone. I hate those penalties. So those things have to be cleaned up more than anything else, so that you don't give a bad team like the Vikings a chance to come back. So congrats, you fixed the turnover issue last week, but you committed 11 accepted penalties. So can't really have that. And it's not been their way all season. So hopefully those two things can be calmed down, and Minnesota basically doesn't even have a chance to think about an upset.
John McGrath, always appreciate your opinions and comments in the chat, my friend. He goes, really like that Sam took the easy yards by dumping the ball off to Barner and K9. More of that, please. Yeah, that was one thing I'll say about Sam did well in this game, was getting to check downs. Like, it wasn't there. I'm not going to force it. I'll just swing it out to K9 and let him do his thing.
Yeah, the first drive of the game, 3rd and 13, and you end up with Darnold not seeing what he likes down the field. Titans were playing quite a bit of coverage, so JSN was probably the first read. There are 4 Titans near him. You check it down to Barner. There's all that open space. How many times over the years have the peak defenses gotten killed by that exact play, where there's a check down underneath and they're too far back behind the sticks and they give up a first down? So simple, smart football.
All right, we got Ian Victor in the chat. Goes, what's up, guys? Won't be in the chat tonight. Just want to say a few things. Got to clean up the tackling. The game was more so, or this game was more so, get the job done. Yeah, and I think we talked about that quite a bit at the beginning. Like, there were things in this game where, yes, Seattle just needed to reset, get back in the win column, do some of those things, and then I think we'll see a more cleaned up version of that. Because I think for Mike, it's, I think it was Greg Bell brought up, and it might have been on Dan Vienz's show, Seahawks Forever. And if you haven't, sub up to Dan's channel over there. He does a great job. I think Greg Bell mentioned something along the lines that this is the least amount of contact, teams done since he's been covering the Seahawks when it comes to tackling under Mike McDonald. Like, they just don't hit each other a lot and do a lot of those things. And that's something that's interesting, because you see some of these tackles that are being missed, and it's just simply like guys are sliding off. Like, they're just not finishing through and doing some of the things that Pete's defenses, as much as we had other issues, they were generally a better tackling team in some respects.
Yeah, I think some of those 4th down plays were, and even some of the 3rd down conversions were instances of the tackling wasn't very sound, and it gave Cam Ward an opportunity to make a play happen, or even the checkdowns that turned into slightly bigger gains than we were hoping for. Those things have got to be cleaned up, but also some of our better tackling guys are going to be back on the team pretty soon, you would like to think.
Agreed. John comes back in. The re-signing of Diggs should help, combined with D'Anthony Bell getting more playing time. Yeah, that I think is going to help in the back end for sure. At least hold over until Love and Okada can get healthy and get back. What else do we have in here? We got Jason James coming in with great show. Appreciate you, Jason. Brian Myers says, need Horton back soon. Yes, I think Torrey Horton not being a part of this pass offense is definitely something that's affecting it, because not that I'm disappointed in the fact they haven't been able to get Shaheed going more, but I think also part of that is coming late to the party. I think, to be honest with you, I predict Shaheed's blowout or blow up game where he goes crazy, or at least is more involved. It might actually be that Rams Thursday night game, because that'll be at least 4 to 5 weeks since he's been here. And you should have more of the playbook understood at that point, because you'll have enough install weeks to get a full grasp of what this playbook is.
Yeah. I meant to bring up the Shaheed thing earlier, but since Horton left, so what were we talking about? From the Cardinals game onward, They've had 3
Yes.
games since he went to, well, he's only now just on injury reserve, but in the 3 games he hasn't played, the non-JSN receivers have 10 total catches combined. So they're not even really trying. Like Kupp is
Yeah.
on a low volume target. Shaheed is not getting a lot of looks. And then White's is not getting many looks. And Bobo, to me, is very much a guy who could get cut or waived by the end of the season because of the guys who are going to come back. And he is now hardly playing on offense. And he's committing penalties on special teams too. He's not returning kicks. So they need Horton back. And Shaheed, I think it's going to take an offseason. I think they're going to re-sign him. Maybe that's why they're doing this gadget stuff that I don't totally like, but I think the chemistry is not there. Like there was that play where Shaheed could have had a big play across that field in the 2-minute warning, and either he was supposed to sit in that zone, and then Darnold was expecting him to sit in that zone, or it was a bad ball by Darnold. And if it was a bad ball and it was supposed to be in stride, Shaheed probably scores. So
Yeah.
I think those opportunities are going to be there. Like the Rams touchdown that was knocked away by Forbes. Those opportunities are going to be there. You're just going to give it time. There's a reason why, for the most part, wide receivers who get traded midseason are not instant impact players. It took Odell Beckham until the Super Bowl really to have a huge breakout game for them, and then he got hurt. So just think about that when you think about any big receiver acquisition midseason.
We got Blue and Green Zone in the chat. Haven't seen you for a while, my friend. It's great to see you back in the chat. Goes, does Quandre Diggs fit well in the Seahawks defense right now? He does for what they're going to probably ask him to do, which is just be a Band-Aid. Don't be more than that. Just hold things together for us until the rest of the guys come back.
Yep. And again, these next 2 weeks, you're not playing elite offenses. And in fact, you're playing a very poor offense this week. So it's a soft landing for Quandre if he's called upon the next couple of weeks, as opposed to, guess what? We're signing Quandre Diggs to play the Rams in the biggest game of the season.
No, exactly. Dennis comes back, goes, Bryce, do you think we need to get others involved other than JSN? Yes. I will just say plainly yes. And not that I don't want to see JSN break the record, because I really want to see that, because I would just be icing on the cake to this season in some respects to see a Seattle receiver with a non-high volume pass offense break Megatron's record. But you're going to run into games similar to the Rams game where, yes, JSN still gets his yards, but you got to be able to take advantage of the other matchups elsewhere. And I think having Torrey Horton back at a point will help. I think what I'll say with Cooper Kupp right now, and I know there's a lot of people out there saying, okay, Kupp's gone next year. I don't know if that's necessarily true unless Kupp retires, because I think there's value he still brings to this team. What I will say, though, is I think you see Kupp move into a receiver 3-4 role in Seattle when Horton's back, and you'll see more of JSN, Torrey Horton, Rashid Shaheed out there, and Kupp will come in sparingly in certain situations and will become more of a situational receiver to a point.
Well, if they do that, they need to cut him and restructure his contract like they
Agreed.
did with Dunlap, or just restructure it anyway, because he can't be 3 or 4 making that money.
No,
but
agreed.
yes, Kupp. The thing with Kupp is I don't really think he can beat man coverage vertically anymore. So he's still valuable sitting in zones or whatever, and he's still a heck of a blocker. It's just that when you look at the non-JSN options, maybe we're starting to see why they're having Walker involved more. Barner, of course, is coming off a 10-catch game 2 weeks ago and had a couple of catches in this Titans game. I'd like to see a Royal get a little bit more involved, just for what he can provide, but they're going to have to get a little creative for as long as Horton's out, just because Shaheed is not up to speed, and then everybody below Shaheed is a non-factor at the moment.
Agreed. We got Islam in here, goes, JSN's attitude reminds me so much of Larry Fitzgerald. That is a very good comp.
Yeah, and unlike Larry, who got to play with some very sorry quarterbacks for a good chunk of his career, he gets Darnold. I mean, if Geno is the worst quarterback he ever plays with as a starting quarterback, you could do a lot worse than that. And frankly, one of his biggest highlights was with Drew Lock at quarterback, the winning touchdown against Philadelphia. So even in the rookie season not being anything special, he gave us 2 game-winning touchdowns against Cleveland and Philly. So yeah, love his attitude. And I guess his comments about Shane Waldron are going to live on forever, especially given what happened to Shane in Chicago. But
oh man, yeah, he's a good guy. Is this thing live? Is this recorded? That was such a good soundbite from JSN. We got Amy Holmes, our moderator, in the chat. Always good to have Amy in here. go. I guess there's a conversation going on about Derek Hall. She brings up Hall has the highest pressure rate, doesn't he? I believe out of our defensive line, yes, he does have the highest pressure rate. Like, I feel so bad because even in that game, he had a sack and Ward just slipped out of his grasp. Like, he literally had beat the tackle, was right there, and literally just couldn't finish in time. And, again, he's missed a few weeks. I think Hall, again, is showing, in my opinion, between him and Mafe, it's not really a debate anymore who the better edge rusher is and fits in Seattle's long-term plans better. But yeah, I think Hall has the highest pressure rate currently on this team, or highest number of pressures.
He probably does, and the snap count also reflects that Hall and Chen are playing more than Mafe. So, Hall might not be getting the sacks, but I think this is one of those instances where the lack of sacks does not do justice to how well and how impactful Derek Hall has been. And if they would just start calling more holding penalties on some of these plays where Hall is on the cusp of getting a sack, then or those guys just don't hold at all and they just give up the sack, then maybe we'll start to see a course correction.
Amy comes back in with one more. She goes, Reek has been great since the concussion. Basically, yeah. The concussion's almost like it knocked some sense into him.
Yeah, it must have been. But yeah, Reek is playing at please extend me level.
Yeah.
And you know what? The fact that he's not a starter but playing this well does make for an interesting offseason decision as far as, because he is a starting caliber corner. Like, he has enough of a resume on that. But in McDonald's system, I think that this Joe Witherspoon Woolen combo works well, where Woolen is not the starter, nominally speaking, but if he's playing 85, 90% of the snaps anyway, is it that much of a difference? We're really splitting hairs here.
No, agreed. And I'll say this. I think Woolen and Walker have started to play themselves back into that conversation, because I could see a situation with K9 where it's not a mega deal. It's maybe like a 1 year or 2 year deal that is maybe 7.5 or something, where the total value of it, if we're talking, is like $14 million total value. But there are incentives and playtime incentives that he has to hit by being healthy and on the field. Because the way Mike McDonald is talking about K9 now, it's like he's kind of falling back in love with what K9 can do.
Totally. If anything, it's Kobe, whom I think is unlikely to be re-signed, and that he's a all right player, but you can't stay attached to all of your picks, and he might be the odd man out. And he's going to make good bank in free agency.
Agreed. John McGrath, do you think Zabel being so good will have a positive effect on John Schneider's view in drafting O-line in the future? I think it'll have a positive view on John taking O-lineman in the first round, a lot more in that higher above 20 range. I don't know if it's such an odd thing, because the reason I say that is you look at how many picks they've had. Christian Haynes, for example, in the third round, where they do this process. I think the bigger positive factor here, John, is if Rick Dennison and John Benton stick around, which I intend that they, and assume they will. I think that's where you're going to see John's view of drafting O-linemen really be affected, is having those guys are as your evaluators, along with Steve Hutchinson, who's kind of their, a special advisor for the O-line, really start to have that effect. I think that's the biggest change. Is I still will say this. I think Cabledew and Richmond are actually going to be decent NFL offensive linemen. I think Richmond's going to be a good swing tackle. Maybe he's your swing tackle next year, and Josh Jones isn't on this roster. And I think there's an argument to be made that maybe Bryce Cabledew, like from what I've heard from inside that building, they really like Bryce Cabledew. And I think there's a shot he may be a guy that starts competing for right guard next year as a starter. And they'll still add, I think, someone there, a veteran or whatnot. But I think they like the guys they drafted this year in Zabel and Cabledew and Mason Richmond.
Yeah, well, maybe it's just what they think about, or Schneider thinks about drafting interior linemen early. Because, come on, we're only 3 years removed from them taking Cross in the first and Lucas in the third. He took Okung with his very first pick, and they probably overdrafted Carpenter in 2011. So there have been times when Schneider has committed to the O-line early. It's just that, sometimes they turn out to be Jermaine Ifedi. So in Zabel's case, he fits the need right away. They didn't screw around and then put him in a position where he's weak. And he's been a true plug and play left guard. And that's all you could ask for. as just the floor. And then his ceiling, I mean, the sky's the limit with him. So, yeah, I think this will have a positive effect on continuing to not just draft and develop, but just having that continuity on the line. I think, to me, extending Cross in addition to extending Lucas will be a positive effect on how on how Schneider views continuity on the line, because it's not like he's had a great history of extending guys. Even guys like Dwayne Brown are rare extensions, let alone the guys he's actually drafted.
Agreed. Dennis comes back with, Bryce, do you think there's more going on with Love? He's been out 8 weeks. Hamstrings are tricky. And they're one of the very few things where if you don't let it fully heal and then properly rehab it and get it back up to where it's a full go, the slightest thing can retweak it. And I am almost certain that's what happened in Arizona, where Love felt good. He's like, yep, can do everything. And then he went to do something without thinking and just exploded to make the play, and it let go again. And that's why they're just being extra cautious this time, because the worst thing you can get is when these guys tear a hamstring, and then that would mean Love would probably be out till at least training camp of next year if he completely tore his hamstring.
Yep. So I think that, yeah, he re-aggravated it, and hamstrings are nothing to screw around with. If you have a hamstring injury, you are almost certainly missing at least one game. So he probably tweaked it enough for it to be a problem still this late in the season.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up tonight's show. We've been on here for an hour and a half, just kind of going on and on and on about the Seahawks and such. So I'm sure everyone's tired of listening to us. But again, appreciate everybody being in the chat. It's always great having you guys in here and the comments and the questions you guys bring to this. And so, Mookie, final word before we end tonight. What do you guys got going on over at Field Goals over this week leading up to the matchup with the Vikings?
Well, Wednesday will be Alexandre Castro providing his all-22 review of how the rookies played, and also just some of the good and bad from that win over Tennessee. So be on the lookout for that. I might have something on the playoff picture and our rooting guide, starting with Thanksgiving Day, because Green Bay and Detroit are teams that Seattle won't play this season, just regular season, but they may be very relevant to the playoff chase come January. And then we'll otherwise be taking the day off on Thursday, because it's just sit around, watch football all day. And then we'll be kind of back at it on Friday, even though there's the Bears and Eagles Black Friday and it's still technically a holiday. It is still a Seahawks game week, so we'll have the injury report stuff and all that good jazz. But yeah, and don't forget, not just at Field Goals, we will have a Seahawks syndicate coming at you on Wednesday, the two of us and Brandon Kane and Dan Viens. And we'll definitely be chatting quite a bit about more than what we discussed today, but also we'll have our first injury report for the Vikings game. So we'll get a little bit of a hint as to who's available and who isn't, and also the confirmation of Quandre Diggs coming back to the via practice squad, and maybe, just maybe, some guys getting onto the active roster now that there's an open spot when Horton was on IR, and Darion Kendrick also got waived. So 2 spots to fill. Who's going to fill them?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And yes, don't forget tomorrow night. I believe we're going just after 7 o'clock tomorrow night Pacific time for the Seahawks Syndicate, which is myself, Mookie, Dan Viens of Seahawks Forever, and Brandon Kane of the Hawks Nest. And we'll break down kind of what's gone on the last 2 weeks, plus look ahead to the Vikings game and the back half of this, couple game stretch here leading up to the Rams rematch. So make sure you guys tune into that. Outside of that, I will still be doing a live preview show later this week. We'll be breaking down the Vikings matchup in detail. And then I will be on, I believe, on Sunday for a post-game reaction show, quick 30 to 40-minute video after the show, or after the game, I should say, of the show. And we'll break down the matchup versus the Vikings. And then Seahawks Aftermath will be back next Monday. And Michael Thompson will be back to join me on that one. So we have a bunch of cool stuff coming up over the show and a couple cool guests next week. Corbin Smith will be stopping back on the show, as well as Jackson Bevins of Cigar Thoughts will also be joining me to break down some more of the Seahawks season and what's going on. So I'm Bryce. That's Mookie. Appreciate all of you guys being in here tonight and joining us for this conversation. And as always, stay loud, be proud, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Have a good night, everybody.